I have been to the Valley of the Youth, and I have heard their prayers at an Indigo De Souza concert in Nashville. Though, to be fair, I can't really determine the age of the room in any definite manner. Indigo is 29, which puts her in the zillennial micro-generation, which is technically just on the other side of the millennials from my micro-generation, the zennials. Zennials are the cusp of millennials and Gen X, and zillennials are the cusp of millennials and Gen Z. So maybe there's some through-line solidarity there. Whatever the case, I am buying what the zillennials are selling. And therefore, I guess I am also buying what Gen Z is buying. I don't know, but I got some pictures and a little bit of video, and now 2 more Indigo De Souza records that I didn't have before. And I'm going to show them off and tell you all about the show, including the opening act, Moth, with an E at the end and an accent over the E. I really should have bought the Moth record. The show I went to was on Saturday, April 4th at the Basement East in Nashville, Tennessee. I arrived to a nice, cool blue stage that looked like a good place for Dr. Bill Harford to receive truth. The Basement East is a great room. It's very intimate, kind of on the smaller size. I saw the Breeders there a couple years back. It was fantastic, of course. But because it's a small venue, it's pretty easy to get close to the front there. And I was there early enough to have no problem at all. And so I took a place close to the front, among the more dedicated of the fleshy youngsters. And then I basically just stood and waited for my mushrooms to peak. Because what else am I going to do? The opening act was called Moth with an E and a little accent over the E. I'm repeating that again because Moth themselves repeated it many, many times, and now it is with me forever. Thank you, Moth. Anyway, Moth's band came out before Moth. The drummer was a petite, cute little nerd with glasses and a do-rag. So not to judge on looks alone or make comment on physical appearance, but it did seem obvious from the start that they were going to kill it. There was also a red-haired, beardy guy who handled bass via keys and a bass guitar, also seemingly killing it from the get-go. I felt very good about this. Then Moth themselves took to the stage very confidently. They waved to the audience with a kind of strut that was like, yeah, I'm the kid, you know. Then they took to the microphone to sing excessive fuck words through a very obvious auto-tuner. And this made me apprehensively wonder, who is this kid? Well, it's Moth. In hindsight, I think that opening song was called Naked in the Hotel Bar, but I can't find a set list to confirm this. Either way, I was wary. The next song, if I remember correctly, was Total Popstar, wherein our Moth sings about being a real total pop star as well as a rock star. First, I was like, this cannot be the future of music. But then I listened more closely, and I noticed this was all seemingly kind of tongue-in-cheek. The actual lyrics are, I'm a pop star, totally a pop star, that's why I'm so awful. And the song is basically, seems to be, a criticism of how shallow and vapid the idea of like pop life or being a rock star is. And then it all snapped into place, and I realized something. Moth is fucking great. Here's a little clip of that song. All right, now, First of all, I want to say when the auto-tune was off, they proved to be a pretty proficient singer. They played guitar sometimes. That also seemed solid from what I could tell. It definitely gelled well with their very booming, precise rhythm section that I had already mentioned before. The music was modern and poppy, but also clearly organic. I mean, they had like synthesizers and stuff like that, but I'm saying they were actually playing the music, not just running tracks. And they had a lot of heft for a three-piece band. Here's another clip from their live show. This is Moth.
Another secret. I wanna know how, I wanna know the reason, I wanna see screaming. I wanna hear the people say, yeah, I wanna be the reason.
At one point, Indigo actually came out on the stage and joined them for a song, and I later learned that Indigo and Moth are neighbors, I guess in Los Angeles, where they live. Now, I actually found Moth's stage banter to be ultimately really charismatic and light and queer and funny, and I just could not help but warm up to them and basically become taken by the Moth charm. This seems to be on brand for old Moth because there was one song, which I've not been able to pin down yet, but they repeat something to the effect that you'll have to learn to like me. And yes, I did indeed learn to like Moth with an E and an accent over the E. I feel like Moth might be a Leo, but I could be wrong. Definite Leo musician vibes. After Moth was the main event, of course, Indigo De Souza. Indigo is not a Leo. She is a Cancer, born in the middle of the Cancer period, and definitely carries that Cancerian vibe. Her writing is very steeped in relationships and a kind of emotional eroticism that I really appreciate. Her presence is very watery, very fluid, though yes, I know she technically analogizes herself as Earth or an island and be like the water, so spare me your corrective comments. And I will say that you may understand those lyrics a little better if you read the badass article she wrote for TALKHOUSE. It's a very cool perspective. I will link the article in the description. I definitely appreciate it as an Aquarius, a water bearer, but Cancer is a water sign, and she moves very fluidly on the stage. Lots of extending arms and bouncing hair. She has really good hair. She was backed up by a 4-piece band, 5 total if you count her. They all stayed pretty faithful to the songs as far as I could tell, but there did seem to be a few maybe jammy moments here and there, which were a nice surprise, if I'm interpreting that correctly. The thing is, I'm not intimately familiar with her whole catalog yet, so maybe every note was intentional, but it didn't feel that way. It felt like a good old rock show, definitely a different lane than Moth's material. Though at one point, she did make some reference to her newest album, Precipice, as being part of her pop period, and then kind of explained it by saying she was happy during its creation, as if she needs a reason because the album is wonderful. But I appreciate the insight, and this was interesting to me because at the time, that was the only album of hers that I knew anything about. So I was unaware that some people consider Precipice to be a departure for her. Again, though, the more rock and roll musical aesthetic was basically a pleasant surprise. I've said in other videos that I like to see a band before I buy their record so that familiar elements from the live show can kind of find their way back to me when I listen to the record. So I purposely cut off all my exposure to her works beyond Precipice until after the show. and I dearly love Precipice as an album. So that's not to say that Precipice doesn't have some rock-oriented moments, such as Heartthrob, the first single, but that's really kind of an outlier in the album's overall style. And strangely enough, she didn't play Heartthrob. They didn't touch that song at all at the show, which was kind of surprising. But also, it really flies in the face of the corporate demographic hand-wringing bullshit to omit one of your furthest-reaching tracks like that. So I do love flying in the face of the corporate demographic hand-wringing bullshit. So good for you, Indigo. She did, of course, play other songs from Precipice, including Be Like the Water, which I mentioned, and is definitely a personal favorite of mine. Here's a little clip of Crying Over Nothing from that album. Yeah, that's really nice, you know? She also mentioned that Not Afraid was the first song she wrote for Precipice, and the title track, obviously called Precipice, was the last. Not Afraid, as I've said before, contains my favorite sentiment on that album, which is the lyric, "When you let go, the people you love are free when they're with you." That's like a legit life lesson that I'm legit trying to learn, and no one I can think of has stated it better than that. No one. Of course, she also played songs from her other albums, and that's when I saw what the people who came before me saw. The anthemic nature of her writing. Songs like Take Off Your Pants and You Can Be Mean had a lot of the audience singing along and moving. As close as I was to the stage, you can't really tell it from the little bit of video that I've got, but here is a clip from You Can Be Mean. Yeah, those songs are so catchy and just solid. How can you not just catch it? There was also this very explicit sing-along portion where Indigo, after much deliberation, chose a note from the keyboard, one of the keyboards, held it down and had the audience sing basically ah sounds in unison. Then she went out into the audience and just kind of merged with the sound and merged with the bodies around her. It was really exquisite. Here's a clip of that. And keep in mind that this is improv, basically, for her. So like I said, that was basically kind of improv for her. And what I mean when I say that is she talked about how when she does that at shows, sometimes she just harmonizes and sometimes lyrics come to her. And this was obviously a show where the lyrics came to her. And I think that clip and this portion of the show really shows range in her voice, which I didn't know was so powerful from hearing Precipice alone. She definitely has a distinct voice, which I really love. I described it in another video as applying tasteful warbling at times. But hearing her live direct from the voice box was just so beyond my expectations. She projects so well and so clear and so beautifully with these occasional little operatic asides I noticed here and there. Her voice is really the centerpiece of the thing. Sometimes you see solo acts and you wonder what even separates them from like the backing bands that seem to carry all the weight. But with Indigo, her backing band is amazing, but it's clearly a support for her voice and her presence and her songs. I think she has the goods to endure well into the future. I think there are plenty of other musicians in the upper echelons of the music industry that, quite frankly, wouldn't be able to hold a candle to her when it came to actual songwriting and having a genuine presence. But also the younger people have this lovely tendency to kind of reject celebrity. And I don't know what that means for Indigo, who I think absolutely deserves celebrity given her very clear abilities and, again, authenticity. Also, I want to mention she did not only sing but also played guitar, though this varied from song to song. She did mention that when she was not playing guitar, she felt like she was singing karaoke. I thought that was kind of cute. Cuter still, perhaps, is a story she told about a 9-year-old girl who was at her Atlanta show the night before. Apparently, it was the girl's first concert ever, and she told Indigo that she was learning to play guitar because of her, because of Indigo. Something like that. I don't really remember. And Indigo's advice was to push through the pain as calluses develop from playing. I thought that was very sweet and wholesome, and Indigo De Souza is probably a good role model to have. When the show was over, I bought this t-shirt I'm wearing. I also bought 2 records I did not have by her before: I Love My Mom and Any Shape You Take. I want to point out that all her album art is very consistent and beautifully painted by her mother, Kimberly Oberhammer. At the time of recording this, I've only listened to I Love My Mom just a handful of times, getting reacquainted with songs that were new to me at the show, and of course learning about pre-Precipice Indigo. I feel like it's opened new windows into her being as an artist for me, and I look forward to breaking into Any Shape You Take, which is very critically acclaimed from what I understand. But I take the slow path with records. I usually want to know them inside and out for a few weeks before moving on to a new one. I do regret not buying anything by Moth with an E at the end and an accent over the E, because now that I'm not there, I can't actually find the album Total Popstar on vinyl anywhere, despite an apparent release back on August of 2025. What's up, Moth with an E and an accent over the E? Where is your record? That's on me for not buying it at the show, obviously, but I loaded up on so much Indigo merch that I was like, well, I can get it online later after my coffers are refilled. But no, it seems streaming is my only current option for now. I will put a link to that album on YouTube, not Spotify, in the description, as well as the appropriate BANDCAMP links, so that way you can check them out for yourself. One final thing to note is that Indigo actually came out by the merch tables after most of the audience was gone, with Moth, both of them. And though some audience was still there, I noticed that no one approached her for an autograph or anything. I was kind of shocked by that, but maybe that's part and parcel of the whole rejection of celebrity that I was talking about. Or maybe people were intimidated. I know I was, but only because nobody else was going up to her. I would have loved to have gotten an autograph on one of the records that I bought, but I didn't want to be that person. However, I also noticed they had a little board set up where people could write notes to Indigo on little multicolor Post-its. And I thought this was a pretty good idea and also might kind of take the teeth out of fan zeal a little, but I didn't leave a note. So yeah, Indigo De Souza, a force of nature that I hope to see expand larger and further until she is queen of the Zillennials. I'll probably try to catch her whenever she comes around now, but as an introduction to her live show, this one in Nashville was a welcome first for me. I am now up 2 more records by her, and I haven't even listened to one of them yet. And there's a whole other album by her out there that I haven't even scratched the surface on. I love the honeymoon phase where an artist that's new to you is still unexplored and you're still like learning all about them. And if Moth ever comes back around, I will be there for that too and won't make the same mistake of not buying the record. But in the meantime, you should buy the Moth record if you're fortunate enough to catch them with Indigo on this tour. You can at least stream it otherwise, and you should also buy everything by Indigo De Souza, see her live, give her all of your money. She reflects hope for the future to me. Lastly, you should like and subscribe to this channel. Click the thing. Okay, bye.